The last of our 2002 Swart-Wilcox Summer Sunday Series.
22.
What did I say?
Two.
Okay, I'll sit down now. I'm through. um, this is when I usually introduce you to the history of the house, but I really don't need to at this point, and mention that it would be nice to become a friend and to tell you about the important things like, I know, the important things like there's a handicapped accessible bathroom in that door, and in case of emergency, make your way as best you can because there's no fire exits here. With that being said, I also proceed to tell you about next week's program, and there isn't one, so I won't tell you about next week's program. However, I will tell you that coming in September is America 250, a Living History Day. It is put on by the Catskill Regional Teacher Center. It will be involving the social studies class that is learning how to teach social studies, I guess would be the best way of saying that. But all teachers are invited to it, and it is free of charge to teachers. So if you know of any teachers, it's a wonderful opportunity. If you remember the Bicentennial in 1976, when the sixth graders camped in the backyard, remember that, Steve? You were one of them.
I was one of them.
If you remember that, that's exactly what they're going to be doing. They're going to be camping and cooking and marching, and a Living History Day. So even if you're not coming down for the whole day, you might be interested in coming down for just a little bit of the day. And that will be on September 22nd. From 8 a.m. But you don't have to be here that early. From 8 a.m. till 3. Now, by now, all of you know the history of the house. 1807, the two families that lived here. It's the oldest house in the city of Oneonta. Today, we were hoping to give you the rest of the story. And as happens with everything in life, particularly post-COVID, there are changes. So on Wednesday, I got a phone call, and Walt Ashley, who is our guest speaker, was not going to be able to join us. He has COVID. But as sick as he was kind enough to send me an email. And so put on your disbelief for a moment, and here's Walt. I apologize for not being able to be here in person. But after avoiding COVID for 3 years, it now found me. As for the content of my report, I must ask you to correct anything I say, since I'm trying to remember something that happened 50 years ago, without any notes to refer to. Helen has agreed to listen to any additions or corrections you may have from my memory, so I appreciate that. I moved to Oneonta, Walt said, in 1973 and taught special education for Oneonta BOCES for 31 years. Not long after I came to Oneonta, I went to an Upper Susquehanna Historical Association meeting and learned about the Swart-Wilcox House from Diantha Scholl, who wrote this wonderful book, Landmarks of Otsego County, with pictures and text about historic structures in the area. I suspect that many of you already have that book, if I'm not mistaken, right? She told me about a very old structure on land that the city was planning to buy. I thought it would be reasonable to make progress towards saving the house before the Bicentennial, as I believed that the city would purchase the property soon. Sadly, this did not come to pass in time to get the work done by the Bicentennial celebration and parade. As you can see from the pictures of the house and the site, at the time, it was in very bad repair. There were holes in the kitchen floor. Obviously, the roof was leaking. The drive shed was falling down over there. And there were trees growing out from the corner of the foundation, and you can see one here. And you can see them there. Which also meant that the trees were close enough to the house to fall on the house. So Walt applied for and got a small monetary grant called Unique New York. I was able to buy tools and a chainsaw to help begin the cleanup of the property. And here he wanted me to stop and ask if any of you remember Mrs. M.A. Groff on the corner of River Street and Main Street. Raise your hands if you remember her. Great. Well, he bought the chainsaw from her, but he couldn't remember her first name. So if anybody remembers her first name, we'll have to tell Walt. He thought it might be Flossie. Okay. Well, he bought the chainsaw, and then he asked if there was somebody who could repair it. And this is her quote that he remembered 50 years later. "He ain't no college boy. He's a self-made man." During the time of this initial cleanup, I ran afoul of Dr. New, who berated me for cutting down the berry bushes that were over there that the birds needed for food. Since the city did not own the property, I could not use any city workers. During this time, I got Fred Rath from the New York State Historic Preservation to shoot photos of the house. I have no idea what happened to them. I also contacted a restoration architect, Anton Lucas, who visited the site, took sketches and measurements, and drew blueprints of the house. When work on the house did not progress soon, it was a comfort to be able to look at the blueprints. They are now so faded it is hard to read them. And he did take them back with him. He found them in the house, and he took them and was cleaning them up, but he didn't get them back. I'm sure he will. Also, at that time, I consulted a restoration carpenter, Ted Cipher. So I don't blow away. He visited the site, Ted Cipher. During this time, I served on the Oneonta Bicentennial Commission, which did not help my project as at that time, approached and the city had not completed the purchase of the property. Sadly, the big parade was to march right past the unrestored house. But I suspect that many of you were here and remember it. Raise your hand if you were here at the Bicentennial. Well, quite a few, several, a few. You remember we came right up here on the lawn, and that's a picture of Ed Moore standing on the platform that's over where the cake is. So it was quite an affair. When I moved to Hartwick, at this time I bought plywood to cover the windows and doors and to stop vandals from being in the house. As the sale was finally going to happen, I attended Common Council meeting and visited Joe Bernier, the city engineer, in an effort to get some community development funds for the stabilization the house needed. My memory is that the city bought the property about the same time I moved from Oneonta to live in the village of Hartwick. I was able to get some money from the city for stabilization. When I moved to Hartwick, I met Larry Nelson, who had graduated from the Cooperstown Graduate Program of Museum Studies. I was able to hire him to put a wood shingle roof on the house, and you can see it needed it. Put a drive shed, and that's what he's calling the shed to the back, the drive shed back up. And I also think he did some foundation work in the cellar. That was the end of my active involvement in the Swart-Wilcox House. It would be 11 years before the real saviors of the house, Tina, Debbie, Dawn, and Helen, would do their magic and truly save the house, find financial security, and furnish it with period items of local history. In telling me about the corn crib, Helen told me about the Swart relatives who were involved with the Clinton-Sullivan campaign, which ties this house perfectly to local history. Thank you for your attention and for your support of the Swart-Wilcox House. And then he sent me another email, and he said, some people related to my work on the Swart-Wilcox House who need to be thanked. Diantha Skoll, the author, Fred Rath, photography of the house before, Larry Nelson did carpentry to help stabilize the house, Anton Lucas, architect, made blueprints to the house, Ted Cipher, restoration carpenter, Floyd Allen, high school teacher in the Yorker Club, and Joe Bernier, city engineer, community development, and of course the Teachers Corps, Tina, Dawn, Debbie, and Helen. So that was the end of Walt's introduction and basically what he wanted you to know. So we wanted to give you the whole story from the Bicentennial on up. So I'm going to take the next step, because Walt mentioned the city purchased the property from the Wilcox cousin, Van B. Smith from Otsego, and they purchased it with Forever Wild funds to add to the park system. Although at the time, and this is hard to believe, both Walt and Joe seemed to feel that the 6th Ward residents would be just as happy if they burned it down. And then, once the Bicentennial was over, it was forgotten. So in 1988, 12 years later, the Daily Star had a photo, and it said simply, "What's to be done with this house?" And it showed the derelict house. It's on one of these pictures here on the table. We have some pictures up front. Do come up and look at them later. So never underestimate the power of the press. From that one photo in 1988, John Lutz, the Assistant Superintendent of Schools for the Oneonta City School District, stood up the first day of school at the teachers' meeting and said, "Who out of all of you would like to do something with this project?" And it was met with a resounding silence. Nobody said anybody. And I see some teachers that were there at the time and probably remember. Nobody said anything. Well, that Halloween, Tina and I were taking a drive to Boston to see her daughter. And I was still dressed in my witch's costume, and she was still dressed as a cat, as we got in the car and drove through the turnstiles on the thruway, getting strange looks from the ticket takers. And we got talking about this building, and wouldn't it make a wonderful focal point for the 4th grade local history curriculum? So we both agreed it would, and we had just finished an IR&D research project on schools and the changing family, and gee, what are we going to do with all of our extra time? But we knew we couldn't do it alone. We'd probably kill each other. And so we said, oh, I know what we can do. Let's get somebody to help us. Who would be good at history and all of this? And so Debby Clough, 3rd grade teacher, and Dawn Minette, the 4th grade teacher, graciously agreed that yes, they wanted to spend the rest of their life working on the Swart-Wilcox House with us.
There was no volunteering involved.
So that was how we formed. The 4 of us started the project. We went to the city, and at that time, Mayor Jim Lettuce was the mayor, and we talked to them and told them what we'd like to do. We're so close to Riverside School. Granted, we were way over the other end of town in West Oneonta, but we were all Oneonta School District, and wouldn't it make a local 4th grade history focal point? It was just so exciting. And the mayor, bless his heart, said, yes, you can do anything you want with that house, as long as it doesn't cost us any money. And I am proud to say we haven't. Now, we have used New York State taxpayer money, so I guess in a way it's your money too, but we have not used any city local funds. And that's quite an accomplishment for 30 years. Joe Bernier, who was the city development officer, was a great help. The 4 of us were all working. So Joe did the contracts with all of the groups that we needed to have. Crawford and Stearns, an architect firm from Syracuse. They did this study, and it was a fascinating study to us because they really knew what they were talking about. And this went from being a salt box house, like the Lippert House in Cooperstown at the Farmers Museum, to being a German Palatine vernacular house. The difference being they look the same looking at it right now, but this house has an entrance to the first floor on 2 levels. You can get into the first floor, and because it's built on a hill, you can get into the basement from the first level. So that is what made it a German Palatine vernacular house. He also did the contract work with the contractors, and we love Peter Powers. He was the wonderful carpenter who said, you know, you have an ugly galvanized heating pipe running through the upstairs bedroom. I can do something for you if you'd like. And we, of course, said yes. What old house had a galvanized heat pipe running through it? So he put that wonderful little bench that you'll see in the bedroom upstairs. Now, granted, bedrooms didn't have little benches running around them, but it looked so much better than the galvanized pipe. And it was a great place to sit the class down and have them all quiet while you told a story or explained something. Joe also did the paperwork for getting our New York State matching grant. It was for $100,000. Well, 4 teachers, we thought that was nothing. So we started with a bake sale and a cocktail party. And then we said, oh, $100,000. We're never going to make that in the time limit with bake sales. And so we tried a different approach. We went out to the community and got people to help us there. But we were still far, far away from our goal when the deadline was getting close. So in desperation, I wrote a letter to the editor, and bless his heart, Richard Applebaugh saw it and asked Joe for a tour of the house. And he came down and he decided that he would help us reach our $100,000 goal. So you will see there is a plaque to him inside as you go in the entrance. There's a picture of him and a plaque for his help. Now, we have called him our knight in shining armor because he was the one that gave us the first step of money to get into where we needed to go. At one time, we were calling them sugar daddies, but I was told that wasn't a respectful enough term. So instead of a sugar daddy, they are now knights in shining armor. Sounds better, doesn't it? Yeah, I guess so. Well, Richard Applebaugh was quite concerned that the city did not know how to take care of its properties. The skate house had just burned, and he was quite disturbed that that would happen. Wilbur Mansion had gone from being a lovely house to being a little decrepit. And so Richard Applebaugh insisted that the city maintain the house. And to do that, he provided an endowment at Wilbur Bank that gives us enough money to pay the electricity and the pest man and all the basic things that other museums have to go out and find funds for. So he has been most appreciated through the years. We've had several other wonderful knights in shining armor. One of the first ones was Jim Dibble. He was a local boy who used to live just over there on London, one of those streets. Loudon? Luther Street. And he would come over as a young boy, and on a warm, sunny day, he would open the front door and play the organ for the boys. Their mother had been the Baptist minister's daughter and knew how to play the organ beautifully, and they missed that. So if it was a sunny day and a warm day, he could open the door and get enough light inside the room because the windows were all covered with black creosote, and it was almost like being painted black. So without the door open, he couldn't read the music. But he gave us a wonderful stove that's in the kitchen, the double-sided stove, as well as a lot of good advice. But he died rather suddenly and unexpectedly. Another of our shining knights was Ray Beecher. He had been a Hartwick College student and married a local woman, and he wanted to send some Oneonta things back to the community. And nobody else seemed to want them, so he said, would you like them? And we said, of course we would, but we have no place to put them. Well, you can see what condition we were in. That was it. He said, no problem. I'll give you enough money for you to redo the front parlor and name it in honor of my wife, Catherine Shaffer Beecher, which we did, he did, we did, and he gave us enough money to literally wallpaper and paint the whole downstairs. So Ray Beecher is definitely one of our knights in shining armor. Anonymous is also a wonderful benefactor, allowing us to do things with our programs which we never could do otherwise. So thank you, Anonymous, whoever you may be. And also, we have to thank the early support of early friends. Now, I'm sure you all had a mother, and mothers are wonderful. Our first supporter, our first friend was my mother, Mary Constanti. I mean, can you imagine her not supporting her child? She would have been disowned. So my mother, Millie Parrish, who gave us wonderful knowledge and support, has been on our board for years, ended up giving us the postcard collection she had. Lois Herrick, whose garden this is in honor of. Wonderful new antiques and appraisals, was great. And Esther Brzee, who had so many wonderful stories and support for us. So now that the deed and the funds and the friends are in place, Debbie will continue the story. Thank you, Walt.
Thank you, Helen. I have a couple of things that I want to say. First of all, the city has been great. We have a wonderful group of men who work for the city now, and they listen to us and they answer our emails and our telephone calls, and eventually they get to do what they need to do. We still are trying to get shutters on the house, and we're still trying to get some trees taken down and some limbs taken down, but that will happen. As Helen said, we used to come here after we finished working at Greater Plains, and we'd come over and walk through here and see the progress that they were making. One gentleman, he was a wonderful carpenter, but his job was to dress all in white with a big mask and a big hat on, stand on a scaffold in the middle of this living room, and with a small handheld electric sander, get all the smoke off the ceiling and the wooden beams that went across the ceiling. So he spent day after day after day doing that. You can imagine what a dirty job it was. One day Helen and I came here and we walked in, and the ceiling was, the beams were painted bright red. And we thought, nobody told us they were going to do that. So that was a big surprise to us. But we were redoing the house in the Victorian, as if it were in the Victorian era. So there were some odd things that happened. One time we were getting ready to have all the fourth graders come for a program, and we didn't want them sitting on the wooden floor, so they told us, go out and buy the ugliest rug you can find. So Tina and I went to Endwell Rug, and we bought a horrible rug. Well, you can see it inside. It's not the most beautiful rug. It's nothing you would have in your house right now, but I tell that story to the fourth graders, and they look at me and say, no, Mrs. Clough, that's a beautiful rug. So, you know, it's all in the eye of the beholder. But this gentleman who got the job of sanding the beams in the ceiling evidently came to our open house, and I didn't recognize him. He stood right here. He had a white shirt on, he had a pair of khakis on, and I welcomed him, and I said, have you ever been in the house before? And he laughed right out loud, and he said, you don't recognize me, do you? And I said, no, sir, I'm sorry, I don't. He said, you used to call me Dusty. So we knew who he was anyway. As you know, Helen, Tina, Dawn, and I were the driving forces in the 1980s, and then all of a sudden it got to be too big a project, and so we had to get some friends to help us, and we have over the years, and we thank them so much for everything they've done. Anybody who's given us furniture or helped us in any way, paid your dues, whatever it was, it's truly a resource for the city. She mentioned John Lutz. He was our biggest fan at the beginning. He was so happy when the four of us took over the project. We came to see it in January. It was about 20 degrees outside, and it was about 20 below inside. Everything was, no electricity, no lights. Everything was black and sooty, and the place was loaded with bed springs and old shutters, and we almost fell through a hole in the ceiling, in the floor in the kitchen, and it was just horrible. But Mayor let us in, and he came with us, and you know how teachers can be. Oh yeah, this would be great. Can you see this? Well, he's looking around, he's looking at us like we're out of our minds. And well, maybe we were, but it all worked out in the end anyway, so it was great to have. But anyway, John Lutz used to call us the Skunk Works. Now, I was never quite happy with that, and so I got my little iPad out and I looked up Skunk Works. This is the definition from the dictionary. A project developed by a relatively small and loosely structured group of people who research and develop projects, often with a very large degree of autonomy. I thought, right on the money, that's who we were. You want to do what? Well, sure, we can do that. And the board that we have right now is very good about that. You have an idea, you throw it by them, you know, who's going to do what. And if somebody falls and can't do something, somebody picks up the slack and just goes with it. So I'll just tell you a little bit about our board. A number of years ago, Helen mentioned her mother, Mary. We were looking for people to fill certain slots, and one was long-range planning. So Mary volunteered to do long-range planning. Mary was 85, and she died at 92, so you can see that she did her job for quite a while.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Lorraine Tyler, and I am the current treasurer for Swart-Wilcox. I've been asked to talk about the layers that make this all work, and there are many of those layers. Our first group of women are our mothers. Helen, Debbie are still with us. Dawn, Minette, and Tina Morris have moved on.
They're still with us.
They're still with us, but they just moved on to greener pastures, I guess you might say.
Distant past.
Distance pastures. All were educators, and as you know, saw a way of using the house as a way to teach local history to fourth graders. Over the years, the mothers had the house listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and through grants and fundraising won several other awards. You didn't know I was going to say that, did you, Helen? New York State Historic Preservation Award, Property of Merit, National Trust Preservation Award, and the Otsego County Local History Award. These are all mounted in the loo. I'm not sure what that means, but that's where they are, and I hope you'll visit to take a look at them. And it is the loo, and it is so designated. A group that we call the Sisters acts as our board for the house. Board members plan summer programs such as we've enjoyed this summer. And when did we start that? 12? 2012. So we've done a lot of summer programs. They manage the collection. They keep, oh my God, the best records in the world. We are probably the luckiest museum that has no paid personnel with the best assessing process for that, getting our records. We open and close the house. We keep it presentable for summer programs and activities. And when this presentation is over, you are welcome to go in and enjoy the house, tour the house in Onoenta. They arrange artifacts in beautiful displays, as you will see. And they welcome many other groups to use the house. This summer, now we're mostly all educators. Me, I'm a college educator. I know how to talk to 22-year-olds. I don't have the foggiest idea how you talk to 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds. My daughter was so easy, and these kids were not so easy. But we did a wide program this summer, Tuesday mornings. Children, 28 of them? At least, probably more, because I think they morphed on the way over. 68 some. At least 35. We did that summer program with the Y for these children. And every day but one, every Tuesday, they came over. We did all kinds of neat stuff with them. They loved the house. And they sat their little behinds on that ugly carpet, and they did not move. However, the last program, it rained, and we were stuck, and I mean stuck, in the school, Center Street School auditorium. And there must have been 100 of them. At least it seemed like that to us. Anne arranged the program. We had several stations where the kids did something or listened. In my station, they learned how to make corn cob toys, and we played checkers, and we played tic-tac-toe, and we had little girls out of the corn husk. Okay, I managed. None of them got lost.
And set it up well.
And set it up really well. Anyway, we rotated. Inside the house, you'll see the corn, what are they, cornholes, right? Where the kids threw beanbags. And it was a wonderful program. But can you imagine having that in Center Street Auditorium? Here we could divide them up into rooms. There.
No, it was supposed to be on the lawn.
It was supposed, yes, Anne planned it for the lawn, thinking that, you know, be a beautiful day, and oh well. Anyway, we all managed. So we do welcome other groups to use the house, so if, or the grounds. So if any of you are in a group that would like to do that, just get in touch with us. So that's our friends group. They're as active as they want to be. They provide us with funding, they provide us with wonderful ideas, and by the way, we need 8 programs for next summer. so we are glad to get your ideas, and we need, I don't know, how many presenters? At least 8. At least 8 presenters, so please share your ideas with us. We also have brothers, and several of our brothers are here. So Rich and Roy, would you two please stand up?
Jack.
No, I'm
Sorry.
yeah.
Okay, Rich and Roy.
Rich and Roy.
Rich and Roy.
Okay. Rich and Roy spent 1 billion hours, at least, trying to save our shutters. And as much work as they did, they're still falling apart. And so we need to get different shutters. Roy has absolutely refused to spend another minute on those shutters, and we don't blame him. Roy also helps us in lots of other ways. He did a program on fishing, because we're right next to the river. He maintains our trellises, etc.
Don't mention that one right now.
No, he's already, it needed repairing. He's already got it in his car, ready to repair. Rich is what keeps my treasurer's job so interesting. That's all I will tell you. Gary Koenig, who isn't here today, built and maintains our garden wall. And those darn 4th graders, or whomever they might be, always come and mess it up. So Gary maintains that for us as well. Noah Ash and his Boy Scout troop is probably our newest brother. He's the one building the walkway as part of his Eagle Scout program. And be careful, because he's not finished. So there's a little dip there, but it's wonderful and it's coming along really, really well. Dave Rees, kind of like Rich, Dave always has his truck ready. Whatever we need, he'll go pick it up, he'll bring it down, he'll help us carry it. And he brought us the corn crib in pieces. And Len is our other brother. Len comes to board meetings, he makes presentations, etc. Oh, and Jack. I can't forget you, Jack. Will you come up, please?
Yeah.
He's our.
Yep, the only paid one.
This is Jack Ewan.
A knight in rusty armor.
And Jack has etched Swart-Wilcox glasses forever, right? At least forever.
Right.
Yeah. And his most recent project has been this railing, which is to keep us all safe. Jack, thank you so much. And you represent all of our brothers in terms of our thanks. Oh yeah, Jack. Yeah, Jack was with us for the corn program, weren't you, Jack? He says to me, "What have we gotten ourselves into?" Because he doesn't know 4th graders either.
It was amazing.
It was wonderful, really, wasn't it?
Amazing.
Amazing, yes. And you see, he was planning to use the corn crib as his basis, and of course Center Street School doesn't have anything. So anyway, so those, and Walter Ashley, our original brother. I'm sorry he couldn't get here today. Yeah, here he is. Thank you, dear brothers.
Thank you.
We also have a group of women whom I'm going to call mothers in training. And my definition, although Debbie, I didn't look it up anywhere, but my definition of mothers in training is they come to board meetings, but they spend countless hours in the house, around the house. And so these are really instrumental women. They would include Joan Hogard, Kate Avery, Alma. Where are you, Alma? Anne and Helen. But she's already a mother. She's just guiding the rest of us through the process. And then we rely on our own other friends for monetary support. And I can't help, because I'm the treasurer, I have to point out our donation box. And did we bring the friends' applications out?
We ran out of them.
Oh, we ran out of them. Well, if you are interested in becoming a friend, you can join us at any of those activity levels. You just see me afterwards, I'll give you my address. And as any other museum, we have a gift shop. Our gift shop is just at the top of the ramp. And then I wanted to finish by telling you about our dreams, because we have lots of them. If I can get this page turned, we'll be all set. Well, our first dream, of course, is new shutters. This does not want to turn, does it? Yeah, I'll wing it. Every good teacher knows how to do that, right? Okay, we need shutters, but we want wooden shutters. They don't have to be 1880, but we don't want to put plastic on this wonderful house, and Chippa wouldn't let us anyway. We need a barn. There was one here. They kept livestock in it. There are horses. There one cow. I don't know, goats maybe, I don't know. But we need a barn, and our dream for this barn is it becomes a space where we can make presentations like today. Because right now we have to rely on whomever to give us good days. And he's been really good to us with good days, but we'd like a barn. We also would like an apple orchard, because Henry sold apples. In fact, he'd rent you an apple tree for $2.50 if you wanted to do business that way. He sold fresh cider. So we need an apple orchard. We have I think there's an apple tree over there, but it is in sad shape. Our people that do accessioning, Norma, Kate, would love a climate-controlled area. And we think that if we got a barn, we could put part of it in a climate-controlled area. Okay, here we go. We need, as you can see, looking out over our grounds, no, that's all right, I only got one more state. A parking lot. Now, Helen has this dream of a parking lot over there in the woods. Can you imagine that the city does not want to selectively take down trees so that we could maintain the look of that space, but have a parking lot? And you know what their reasoning and or excuse is? Because we old people would probably drive into one of the trees. Now, I don't accept that at all. So those are some of our dreams. I'm sure that you can add to that list, and we would welcome those ideas. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm Norma Slauson. I'm part of the board. And I'll just tell you a little bit about how I became involved in the so-called job I have. I came to a board meeting one time and sat and looked around at all of the wonderful things we have in the house. And I sort of raised my hand and said, do we really have a record of everything that's in this house? And they said, well, sort of. And guess what happens when you make a little suggestion? You get the job. Okay, all right. But everything in this house, with the exception of 2 items, the dresser that's in the downstairs bedroom and the melodeon that's in the parlor has been donated by members of the community. So I think we owe the community a huge thank you. And as of my last count last week, we have about 2,000 items in this house, which have been donated by about 180 people. Okay? Now, I'm going to get into a little bit of nitty-gritty here for some of you. When an item is donated, we have a donation form that we make out that tells the person's name, address, description of the item, and its provenance, where the item came from, a little bit of its history. Okay, we make 2 copies of that, both of which are signed. The donor gets one, and we keep the others for our records. And then we also have an accession book. And in that accession book, we keep track of all the items that have come to us by year. If I can hand them the pail. Okay. This is one of our artifacts. It's a little tin cup, a little tin pail. And everything that we get has an accession number. The number on this is 1996.4.1. And that means that this was donated in 1996. We can go to our accession book and we can find out that this was donated by Ray Beecher, who was the 4th donor in 1996. And the .1 means that it was the first of his donations in that group of things that he gave to us. So this is what and every item in the house, hopefully, has a little number hidden on it someplace. And I have to thank so many people for helping in this job. Anne and Kate in particular. We come over when there's no one else around sometimes, and we pull out the items that have been donated and accession them. And Helen gets to take a picture of every one of them and does the pages for the donation book. And, you know, the process is kind of lengthy and kind of a pain at times, to be truthful. But it does give the donors, I think, you know, some peace of mind and assurance that we're going to be good stewards of what they give to us. And it helps us to keep track of all of our donations and hopefully to keep our sanity along the way. So, the majority of the gifts that we've given are out in the open where people can see them and touch them. And I think we're a little bit unique in that way, that you're welcome to pick up an item and look at it and talk about it. There are other items such as textiles and clothing that we put in storage, and they are kept in archival boxes that are acid-free for preservation. And as Lorraine was saying, you know, hopefully someday we'll have a climate-controlled area for our storage, especially for documents. And there's one thing, as just a little aside, when we were mentioning people that gave us things, the Shedlock family that lived on the corner of River Street and Wilcox Avenue, once we started building our collection, were very gracious and gave us many of Henry Wilcox's papers, legal papers, and deeds that we have. So we do have several primary documents relating to the house. The house pretty much at this point is complete. We were very fortunate this winter to get the cannonball bed upstairs and a beautiful coverlet thanks to some of Helen's relatives, or in-law relatives. Okay. And just in closing, most everything in the house has a story. Okay, this little tin pail that I was showing you earlier has his own little story that you might be interested in knowing. It was made by a man by the name of John Doerr, who came to Oneonta from Nova Scotia. And he was a tinsmith, and he also worked part-time for the Wilbur Bank. And at Christmas time, Mr. Wilbur, probably was David Wilbur at that time, would give his so-called important employees stock in the Wilbur Bank. And his other employees, he would give some other stock to. And that stock was usually kind of a strange named stock at the time called Bundy's Time Recording Company. Have any of you ever heard of Bundy's Time Recording Company? And how many of you know what Bundy's Time Recording Company became? It became IBM. So those poor, unfortunate employees, okay, eventually became Oneonta's millionaires. Okay. John Doerr is the father of James Doerr, and James Doerr and his wife set up the Doerr Foundation, which has given millions of dollars to Oneonta. If Oneonta needed a fire truck, an anonymous donor came forth with the money. Well, guess who that anonymous donor was? Okay. So, you know, everything in the house has a little story connected with it. And I think we just owe the community a huge, huge thank you.
We definitely do owe the community thank you. I have to finish the story. The story is, the way we got this pail is that he made it for his daughter's girlfriend, who happened to be one of Ami Dimmick's daughters, who turned out to be Ray Beecher's mother-in-law. Anyway, it got to the house through Ray Beecher, and the story came with it. But can't you just see a little girl hopping down Walnut Street carrying this with all of her precious things in it, stones and papers? Well, in conclusion, and there is a conclusion to this program, you can see that the Swart-Wilcox House is truly a community resource. As you look at some of these early documents, we have a restoration plan that Walt did back in 1974. We have items from the Historical Association and the talk given in 76 here. And they all mention the hope that this will be a community resource. And I think it has turned into that. Swart-Wilcox both tells the story of Oneonta's history and development through the years, but also of the people who lived in this house and the people who lived around the area and what their life would have been like. We did the house back to 1870 to 90 because, as the historic architect told us, if you try going back to 1807 when the house was built, you've got to take out all those windows. They had just little ones. Those windows are from the 1870s. So immediately we decided that was a good idea. And the other thing he said, when you stop to think about it, when it comes to furnishing this house, they didn't have much in 1807, and you won't be able to get too much in the line of furnishings for the house. And so that was another incentive to make it the 1870s. As has been mentioned before, the Friends of Swart-Wilcox is a totally volunteer, nonprofit group, and we'd love to have you join us. We really would. Thank you for your support, past, present, and future, and for sharing in this wonderful 50-year community adventure, because it has been an adventure for the whole community. I see so many of you who've helped here and helped there and done everything for us. And now you are invited to join us as we thank you all with a piece of very special cake. It's Swart-Wilcox before and after. And before we cut the cake, you'll have to take a look at it. And Debbie will now do the honors.
Debbie and Helen will now do the honors.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.